Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 71, and today we have with us Tim and Alex Porter. So if you have enjoyed what you hear today, you can follow CG Pro at becomecgpro.com or in our private Facebook group. And it's a great pleasure to have Tim and Alex on today. They are co-founders of ModTech Labs and have storied careers working in all the big studios between games and film, and worked at places like Sony and NBC, and currently are working on ModTech Labs, a pipeline innovation company that is all of the things, but very functional in helping optimize worlds for today's real-time climate, and also some AI, and we'll get into all of that. But Alex and Tim, great pleasure to have you here. Been looking forward to this one.
No, thanks for having us.
Thank
Definitely
you so
very
much.
excited to be here. Yeah.
So we got two of you on the podcast, and one of you is in the airport, and
Yes.
I am very, very, very happy that you could both make it. So what I usually like to start talking about is just how you got to this point. Essentially, there's often things that happen early in life that kind of steer you one direction or the other, and I know that you both have worked in the entertainment field. Was that what you set out to do? Were there some early experiences that kind of steered you in that direction? I guess we'll just do this one at a time, or you could say it both at the same time. That would be fun.
We're just over top of each other.
Yeah.
You want to go first,
I'll
Alex?
go first. That's right, ladies first. No, ultimately, I came from the other side of 3D. So my background is actually in interior design and construction management. So I got exposed to things like Autodesk, Revit, and tools like that, AutoCAD. How to build the visualization for places and spaces, and ultimately how to create those functional visualizations for people that are not necessarily inclined in that manner, right? And one of the fun things that I found that Tim and I have in common is that we both are drawn toward things that have an aesthetic side and a sort of analytical side. And interior design is very much like that. You have to do space planning and color theory, right? And I think that sort of fed into the sort of evolution of my career and my interest in wanting to, build a company with Tim. And this is our second official company. We've had several companies, but our first was what we called an XR studio. So building augmented and virtual reality tools for business. And we ran that studio together for 5 years and got our teeth sharpened on, how our working relationship would be, and then ultimately, where we wanted to go. And what we wanted to do is help make other people more functional.
Yeah. And so for me,
Amazing.
mine started really young. My mom worked in radio and television, and my dad is an electrical engineer. And so I spent a lot of my time playing that world, the middle ground between arts and the hard sciences. And so my dad was always really heavy in pushing me into STEM before it was STEM. Doing heavy amounts of, math and things like that. I was doing, advanced calculus by like second grade, because that's what my dad did. He had a minor in math. So he's like, hey, here, do this stuff. I'm like, okay, and I don't know if I necessarily enjoyed it at the time, but I can definitely say it helped shape a lot of the things for my life. For me, went to high school. I actually went to a magnet school, and I was doing, CG work, and this would have been like 1999, 1998. And so I was doing stuff in like 3D Studio at the time, and just really trying to figure out, what I wanted to do. I was did a lot of artwork at the time, hand-drawn art, and got a lot of awards around that time. And so when I went to college, I went to Full Sail in Florida. I wanted to be an artist. Actually, when I graduated, I was very interested in being a render artist, so doing shading and lighting and that side of things. And I did architectural visualization for a little bit, and then I ended up working with Nathan Fouts on Mommy Best Games. So if you guys know old Naughty Dog, so very early Naughty Dog, he was one of the guys who built a lot of their original core technology. And I started working with him on that game and the next one that ended up coming up. And then I worked at Critical Mass Interactive, and then started some work with a woman named Ginger Care Alexis, who had worked with Neil Adams, so the comic book artist. I worked with her for about a year and a half. We did like slot machines and crazy weird stuff in between. And then I worked at Gameloft and Sony Picture Imageworks. I worked at Real Networks for a while, and then 2-Bit Circus. That was a trip. Anybody hasn't worked with the 2-Bit guys, that it's like anything that you can dream of, and then openness. And that really helped, kind of drive me to open back up again. When you start working in studios, sometimes you go, well, this is my job. And then, through my career, I had started as an artist and I converted over to being a tech artist and pipeline TD and things like that. And so, I became very rigid in my thinking and the way that I did. And then going back to 2-Bit, it was like, oh, you could do art that came with this. They had Steam Carnival, they had all of this in between, and it was like, wow, this is kind of the future. And so when Alex and I started Underminer, it was like, how do we make it to where we can do this kind of corporation movement and then change things along so that it can be really amazing and awesome and shiny and fun and beautiful all at the same time. And so that's kind of what shaped me. And this, of course, is a spinoff of that, because we were working on lots of really crazy stuff. Like one day I'd be working on, a VR project. Next day I'm doing AR, I'm doing it on mobile, and then I'm doing it on PC. It's like, how do you deal with all that content in between? And so we started building tools to be able to make that happen. And that's what Mod does. It's like, how do we make it to where, we call this Prometheus effect. When you make this art really crazy thing that you're like, oh, well, I can't do it. Why? Because it's, all the way up in the clouds. And like, how do we make it to where everybody can enjoy it? And so that's something that we put in our tenets, is that artists, once unlabored, will come up with some of the most amazing things. And that's why I put myself into really difficult positions, like we're talking about today, optimization.
Everyone's favorite part of the artistic process, for sure.
I think it's fun.
But it's definitely satisfying when it works. Like going through that, we're making a VR thing right now, and seeing it not work in VR is definitely not fun. Cool. Well, it's really cool to hear about your paths here. With you, were there any things that kind of steered you in that direction? I know, Alex, you mentioned you began in construction. Was there anything there that made you jump towards that, or I guess move away from it and towards entertainment?
Well,
Like
so interior design,
inspirations?
right? No, that's a good question. I decided that it wasn't for me because the way that typically they make their money is they upcharge for furniture, and I was like, I feel like that's a weird model, and it didn't quite feel good to me. I'm not a natural like salesperson. I don't really want to upsell things. I'm like, I was doing it because I love the people aspect, to be honest. And so when we started experimenting in VR, Tim was building these worlds, and he's building them at game scale, right? Which is very different than, VR, where you're immersed in a space, right? And so I'd get in there and I'm like, oh, wow, this is wrong. These aren't, like, rails are too far apart. That's not realistic. That wouldn't be up to code. And stuff like that, like things that don't necessarily make sense, but the design, understanding how design works and how space works, in the way that I did for interior design and construction, it really, helped, I think, drive a lot of our experiences to be more realistic when we started getting into VR and AR. And it was a really fun way for me to sort of, flex those muscles that I already had. And I was like, oh, this was never where I thought I would have gone with this, but it was a really fun and interesting sort of evolution.
And actually, because of that, it pushed me into looking and seeing what other designers and other people were doing in VR and how they were interested. And one of the things that changed my life, and anybody who's doing any VR tech that's out there, if you look at or AR, anything real scale, live scale, Schnell Labs or Schnell, the game studio, they do this thing called brown boxing. So if you remember, what is it? You'll die or boom, you'll die, or whatever it is. They have where you're sitting in a car, and part of it is like you end up having to open up glove boxes and things like that. So they made a physical car that you would sit in. Oh, and now you will die. So physical world that you end up sitting in, and then you're able to open the door and things like that. And so that's what they're doing. They did it in a cardboard box, and they end up working everything out. And that's something that we did heavily and very early on. Is we'd sit there, and like you would have this place that you would walk to, and this area that you could like physically interact with everything. And we actually end up doing a project with Intel at one point in time, which was like early. They called it XR technology, but it was basically MR, what we call it now, where we end up having like a pass-through camera, and then we had real world, and you could pick up physical world objects, but see it update inside of your VR experience. And so like a lot of that kind of led in. It was a blast being able to be there as part of early VR, and being able to make all that work is obviously very important through optimization and things like that. So.
I was also going to mention one of the last projects that we worked on that was our own IP. We started building virtual reality therapy in 2016, which was far too early, realistically. But that actually pushed us because we envisioned this gamified, levelized immersion therapy, right? So each level would get more realistic. So you'd start very cartoony, and you would end up in sort of photorealistic experience. And so because of that, we started digging heavily into all types of very strange we were like, how would you scale content creation? And this is actually what pushed us to develop our internal automation pipeline even further. And that's what enabled us to sort of pull that. We realized, oh, this is the product, and we pulled that out. And so it was literally built for one of the most challenging types of content, which is volumetric video. It's very heavy, very computationally expensive. It's a lot of data, and then we extended it out to photogrammetry and models and all kinds of other scan data and beyond.
Where did the idea for mod tech come from? Because this is hard, right? Starting companies, it's not for everyone. It's difficult. It's challenging, but it's cool. What made you want to kind of break off from? I know that you mentioned you had several companies and several sub companies to it. What made you? What drives you to want to do this crazy thing called being an entrepreneur?
To tell you the truth, I kind of for me, us starting Underminer was because I had worked long enough in the industry, and being a tech artist or a pipeline TD, if anybody does this as a job or as a career, you're the first group to start doing crunch, and you're the last group to get off crunch. And when I tend to work at studios, I would be there lots and lots of hours, and I was coming up with my second daughter was about to be born. And so for me, I needed to find something that fulfilled my passion, fulfilled my mission in the industry, which was make it to where artists can enjoy doing art, and yet at the same time made it to where it was something that was sustainable. It was something that was close to me. My dad wasn't home a lot. He was in my life. He was, my parents were still married and everything like that. I was very lucky in that respect, but he was gone. Like I would come home, and I would be like, hey, where's dad? Oh, well, he's going to be in Saudi Arabia for a month, or he's going to be in like some other place, and he would just be. And so for me, that was very important for my kids to be around. And so when I came into this, I really did want to go ahead and be in that and push forward. So being an entrepreneur is the flexibility and the ability for me to push my vision and push forward the industry as I think it needs to, and moves forward that direction. So we do have a couple of questions.
Yeah, they're coming in from the community. I'll bring them up.
I apologize. But, there you go. I see that.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good to bring that up, because as we are doing this live, unless you're hearing this on the recording, then it's obviously not live. But if you're here right now, feel free to post questions, and we'll try and get to them. Yeah, no, so you mentioned getting to that point in life where you were having a family and looking at the compatibility of that with some of the types of work that you were doing, and so you thought to start a business so we can spend less time working. And how's
Oh, it's not less time working. It's just time working at home. Entrepreneurs are the only
know,
people
I'm
that
just
will work 100 hours so they don't have to work 40.
exactly. You saw where my joke was going. Yeah. So it was really a desire to kind of have control over your own schedule, but also, there needs to be an idea for what you're going to do because you've obviously got to do something. Where did kind of Underminer and now ModTech as an idea, where was that born? What kind of problems did you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So initially, we really were solving our own problem, right? That internal sort of content pipeline, the automation. How do you do that at scale? And that was our own problem at first. And then ultimately, we realized this is the product. This could actually help 5 billion other people that are trying to create products but don't have that meaningful edge to do it at scale, right? Content at scale has always been a problem. Think about render farms. I'm like, you think about, how small and nascent some of these pieces of the industry are because they really just can't scale and they're more of a people-based skill set. There have not been great tools that have been built out to really sort of extend that, if you will. And so, for us, it was, hey, we think that we solved the problem, and we found an investor that just was very bullish. He absolutely fully understood. One of his longtime friends worked at a very well-known company that is associated with Disney and understood the deep technology and tools. And we learned that we couldn't have a conversation with that person because we were doing things that were too similar to things in the industry that were heavily guarded secrets, essentially. And so that really, gave us an edge to start exploring, start building, start creating tools, speaking with people that could be customers and understanding what was an actual need. And that is part of why we expanded heavily away from volumetric video. We still do work with volumetric video, but it's just less of a market for us, a large market. But photogrammetry was a huge extension for us and a massive market. It's still got a lot of opportunity for innovation, iteration, and speed that's not there as much. And I'll let Tim kind of jump in and add to that.
Yeah, I was just going to say for Underminer, it was definitely one of those things where I never set out to do an XR studio. It turned into an XR studio. It was just that was the tech that we were able to delve into really quickly. My skill set was, and I built it backwards. I was initially somebody who was really good at optimization, which is why I became a tech artist. I didn't even know the term tech artist. This would have been like 2010. So like that name was kind of thrown around in some places, but in some other places, like people didn't even know what it was yet. And so I got to the end of one of the productions that we were working on, which was a game called Freaky Fetch, which was a children's MMO. So very early, like, MMO for smaller company kind of thing. It's actually really interesting. You could go to a store, I think it was Kohl's or something like that, and you could buy these things. And so then it'd end up having a token on it, and you could get those tokens to live in real world. So anybody who thought, metaverse didn't exist, obviously, we can talk about that, but like actual tokenization existed back then too. And so my skills, went to optimization, and then it was like, hey, this is a lot to do by hand. And so then I became, really heavy into scripting. And so I kind of like went out and I was like, perfect, I have a very unique skill set. So, you know, after finishing with working with Tubit, I was like, hey, why don't I just start doing my own consulting and things like that? And so that's what we did. We just, started doing a couple of projects, and I initially thought it was going to be like video game projects and or optimize the scene or stuff like that. And we did a couple of those very early on, and then it was like everybody was getting money for XR, and so they were all coming, or AR and VR, and they were all coming to us because they're like, oh, optimizing for VR is really hard, because it's not, and especially at the very beginning, if anybody remembers what it was, you had a 980, which was like the highest GPU you could get your hands on, and the highest CPU and the amount of RAM, and more than a third of your frame rate was just eaten up by the headset. In the very early ones, it was up to 50%, like first ones that are launch titles and stuff like that. And so you're used to, okay, how do we maintain that quality? How do we maintain that look and all of those things? And then let's add on top of that 50% of my frame rate or 30% of my frame rate's gone. Now you have to do some really creative optimizing. So me having spent a considerable amount of time in mobile and stuff like that, it became a natural shift because that was just kind of what was going on at the time. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. So what drove you was seeing a need for yourselves, but then also seeing that a lot of other people had this need and being in that kind of space where, because in traditional visual effects, there's often been optimizing, even with giant render farms, we'd still need to optimize and get our render times down. So it's definitely something which I kind of everybody has to deal with to some extent, but particularly seeing it in the VR and XR space, because there you're dealing with a lot less horsepower than a render farm for sure. We're making something on the Quest right now, which is maybe less than a mobile phone's worth of power. You got to do a lot of things to make it optimal. Do What kinds of places do you see this showing up? What kinds of people are the most interested in what you guys do?
It's usually right now, it's either very, very large studios, or it is the above small, but not quite large studios. So you're talking about like all the way up top, really love it because they like the idea of being able to extend what they're doing and help and go, oh, cool. We can obviously look at this aggregate of if I save 5 minutes here, over the aggregate, we save a ton. And then those not large studios, but the ones right beneath that, the large studios can either hire talent like me, or they can, they can think they can. A lot of them, we've had the conversation. I'm like, oh, what do you have? Or because they're just getting into AI and things like that. And they have the conversation. They'll have one guy in there that'll be like, oh, I'm kind of working on this and things like that. So they can acquire, they can court the talent to be able to make the things kind of like what we do. And it's that medium swath that's underneath that go, oh, actually we can't court them. Building it or paying to outsource to build something custom for us is kind of out of the picture. You guys have something that's already built and you're happy to help customize it. Perfect. And then of course the small level, they want it, but we don't quite crisscross when it comes to things. Like, we're happy to work with them. But it's really hard when you're dealing with, very small companies to be like, oh, like this is the price point, and like, how do you make that work? And we're working on a whole bunch of solutions. If anybody's been paying attention to our workflow of the week stuff, we are trying to move towards prosumer, pro kind of people, individual content creators who are looking to go ahead and make that, because we did identify that as a problem. There's a lot of people who have a lot of talent and a lot of skill, and like we talked about, our mission is making artists do art, not the crazy weird stuff that's around art, not like sit down and have to do optimization, like, but how do you make tools that work for all of them? And the only way that you can do it at that level is in the aggregate. And so we end up having to create some really slick tools that can monetize very quickly, because in the end, we're a business. And as much as I love to do this, and tell you the truth, if I could do it for free, I would. But I have to eat and things like that, and I think everybody likes food. I don't know about you guys. Eating's fun.
What I was
Yeah,
going
no,
to
I
dig
haven't
into just a little bit,
photosynthesis yet. Yeah, go ahead.
right? Why can't we just photosynthesize? It would be so much easier. I was just having a conversation earlier today about how wasteful sleep is. I was like, so much eating and so much sleeping. It's very, very needy, these bodies. But, for us, the other piece is, we're looking at that's education side of optimization, right? We're throwing the word around optimization, but that doesn't necessarily mean a lot of things to everyone, or could mean a lot of things that it doesn't mean to us. And so, for where we sit, our goal is primarily on the software side, to enable just processes to be simplified. So a single click process that would have taken you 2 days to 2 weeks of time, that suddenly you can have it done in 5 minutes. You don't have to think about it. It gets done. It gets handed back. So mesh decimation, all the way into texture reprojection, texture resizing. We actually just launched our own version of text to image and image to depth. That's part of our workflow of the week. And there's a lot of other areas that it can go into. We've primarily, up until now, put out tools that are in the image area. So we're talking about essentially processes that make your content look better and play back well on whatever screen they're going to. And optimization, is not specific to any one type of media, in our opinion. It is a solution for a transmedia sort of application. So we've talked about VR, we've talked about AR. A lot of our work more recently has been in film. So we've done a ton of work with virtual production, particularly because they are combining gaming technology and film production, which is a technical feat in and of itself. Bringing together the right talent, bringing together the right tools, and ultimately executing something in a very different manner than traditional film production would have done. And so, we worked on Europa with ETC and Sony and Pixelmundo and CG Pro and many other wonderful companies. Yep. And so, there are that in that particular project where we sat for optimization we were final pixel, final look. So we took all of the scenes that were used in the film, which was 5 scenes, and we optimized them multiple times for different stages. So they had several pre-production shoots where they were testing lighting or camera configuration or what have you. And then they had the final one at Sony Stage 7, which is a 24K screen. And so they each had very different needs, and they each wanted, to have the scene function at its best possible quality. So ultimately, that is where we sat, making sure that it would always play back and look great.
I think
tell us a bit more about
oh,
sorry, go
no,
ahead.
I was just going to say before we wrap this, the one thing that we all really want to talk about is this is artist enablement. We are taking away the work that artists don't want to do. In the end, we are also not replacing an artist. We're not as good as the artists are. We're looking at that 80% of content that kind of sits in the background, mid-ground. It's going to handle all of those things extremely well. And we do what we call perceptual optimization. So we want to make sure that it still looks the same or still looks relatively the same when you look at them next to each other. That may make sure that you maintain the quality as it goes along.
Great. Yeah, definitely something that's near and dear to my heart for sure. To spend more time on the things that you enjoy doing. I mean, some people do enjoy, as you said, do enjoy the optimizing or enjoy crazy people who enjoy UV mapping or things where it's fiddly, it's invisible, but it's satisfying when it's done. So tell us a little bit more about Europa. So because some people out there might not know what the project is, and I'd love to hear a little bit more of what the process looked like for the work that you did on it.
Sure. So Europa was actually a project with ETC. If anybody knows ETC, they're part of USC. And it started with a considerable number of students, including CG Pro students, including their students. And the whole idea was to go ahead and talk about what is the state of the industry. And the whole state of the industry on it was specifically around, this is Sony Stage 7. This is, what we're looking at as far as technology. This is state of the art. This is what we're doing. And this is how you should go ahead and do content. We've actually continued along with Eric to pick up all of the work afterwards and start writing down, this is how we would deal with storage as well. So we're working on some of the storage stuff. We're also in there talking about this is what happened on the BTS, on being able to make sure that, when this is done again, that it's repeatable, not just for them, but for other people. So there's a white paper that kind of comes out that's associated with it. And then as well, it is going to be absorbed into something called STEM 3 from the ASWF. So the ASWF is part of the Linux Foundation, and it's going to be this really large swath of different open source projects that allow you to test your LED wall, as well as understand different performance characteristics on LED walls. So like you have a bank of panels and a second bank of panels. They have like this lightning storm that makes sure that, they'll both play at the same time, or to make sure that you hit the same color tone. Or in this specific case, the reason why they're bringing that in, and Fathead, which is another one of the projects, is to understand performance characteristics and capabilities that your LED wall has. And these are very important things for the industry, especially as we're just kind of picking this up. The fact that, when we talk about optimization, Ed was like, the industry has talked about optimization, but it's for render farms. There's a different style of optimization that's utilized for real time, and they all play together, and that all works together. But this is a linguistic language challenge and a industry technology challenge combined, because we also have to understand, as we no longer have the production workflow that is this long conveyor belt, we now have a circle of production that happens specifically when we go towards virtual production, a lot of real-time productions as well, is that everybody has to be more educated. We don't want to have a CATS kind of problem where everything needed to be rendered for people to make decisions. And so as people are more educated and much deeper into the technological solutions, then we can all make decisions together. And so that's what ETC is, their kind of mission statement and that kind of movement. And then specifically what Europa was. And what we did on that is, once again, there were 5 different scenes that Alex had talked about. Each one of them had different challenges. And then as well, it needed to be optimized for each one of the stages differently. So for example, when we went to the disguise stage, they make it to where you can have animated objects, and you can do shadow casting, and you can go ahead and, light map baking isn't necessarily that much of importance, because they're a little more open on how they handle things, because their walls are smaller. If your LED wall resolution is smaller, you can get away with a whole bunch more, versus going towards a Sony. Pixo's Bible was thick, and we were given it fairly close towards production. And so one thing that we end up using is we made our own large language model that was trained on that, so that we could actually ask it questions, because being able to absorb a over 100-page Bible by a small group of people who have just seen it once or twice, even, while you're trying to work in production, it was something that was very important for us to be able to have as a salient kind of understanding, to be able to bounce off questions like you would if I literally was sitting down with somebody who was running the stage. So somebody who's sitting there, their entire job is to run the stage. I could easily go ahead and talk to my large language model and go, hey, if I go ahead and, on level 3, if I go ahead and say, have partially baked and partially moving lights, is that going to be acceptable? And then it's like a no. And then I could go ahead and reach out to somebody, be like, hey, in this specific instance, we're going to be utilizing this. It's going to provide a balance and performance. And what we'll do is we'll make sure we make it up on the back end by making some of the textures, as it ebbs off on different areas, lower, so that way we can actually afford that for GPU overhead. Is that acceptable? And so we were able to make those negotiations in a very intelligent fashion, which would have been almost impossible if, I'm sitting there with the book in front of me and they know it, I don't. And the same with the optimization, having that understanding behind the scenes as to how trade-offs work. If anybody doesn't know how real-time performance works, other than removing things like features, functions, and assets, you're not actually going to go any faster. You have to remove stuff for things to go forward. And so, if anything, you can play a balancing act instead. So, in the specific instance that we talked about before, me being able to go ahead and go, I want to be able to do real time rendering on these certain sections instead of having everything baked. There was that trade-off. I said, I will take out in this VRAM area so that we can get up the overhead that we need to go ahead and do the performance that's required. So,
what's your kind of vision of the future with this, particularly with the optimizing side of things? Because there's some more I want to ask you about the AI stuff that you guys are doing, but in terms of the optimization, what would your goal be to remove the need for people to have to know how to do it manually and just be able to have tools do it for the most part? What would you recommend currently that people keep learning how to do it as individuals, or trending towards not having to in the future?
I foresee a future that nobody has to do optimization. What we're talking about is a world of limitations. As limitations are removed, this is not beautiful. It's not amazing. I mean, you can say it's beautiful in a way, where if you look at an optimized asset and you're like, wow, that's really pretty. Look at what they were able to do with the lines. In the end, it's only as beautiful as code. Code can be beautiful. It can be well done. Its performance and what a computer can create is beautiful in a way, but it's not artistic. It's not creative. No, I'm not saying not coding is not creative. I am a coder. I'm not saying that. There's a lot of creativity in that. I'm saying what comes out of this is a repeatable pattern, is a pattern that comes out. And so, yes, I would say for the next little bit, the next maybe year or so, there's still going to be a need for optimization. But I think if my job is done well, which we have a tool called ModOpti, which uses artificial intelligence to be able to understand the differences between where you're doing the authoring of your system and then where you're wanting to play it back. Hopefully that can happen everywhere. And if we do this really well, then you can have content that is built specifically for your device. And so that's the future dream that we have, is that every single phone, every single computer, every single system will have perfectly generated assets just for them. So I would say learn it if you were like getting into the industry, or if you're needing to do it like right this second. Yes. I think within the next couple of years, it'll be completely unimportant, because tools will come out that will replace it and make it to where the only time you'll end up needing to have something is everything goes completely left field. Like, other than that, 99% of the time, you shouldn't need it.
What would you recommend to people, say they've built their workflow or their careers around doing this kind of tech art and
Mm.
optimization? What would you do if you were in that position? Given that you can see, Unreal itself is building things into it that mean there's less optimization that needs to be done in certain
Absolutely.
things. But it seems to be a trend, and I think a noble one. But what would you suggest to those folks?
I mean, that was my skill set when I started as well. My skill was optimization, and for me to continue doing optimization, I became a lot better at being able to go ahead and do tools. So I would recommend, and this is something that I've seen with a lot of technical artists, is them moving on to being a little more skilled in different areas, being able to go ahead and either pick up shading or pick up being able to make tools as they're moving further forward. I think in the end, that skill for that specific individual who has that as a background or has that as an interest is not going to go away. There's still going to be that 5 to 8% or 3%. That's still going to be extremely useful, and they'll find their way into large studios. But that's the way it's always been. Technical artists, there's very few of us, and there's even fewer who have automated and tool skill sets. So go towards that direction. And if you are an optimization person, that's going to be the interest. I think the biggest thing when we're looking at this, when we're talking about, if you go towards games and real-time production, everybody did a little bit of optimization. You're in the end, very few of it, or very little of it, was actually done by just one person. The biggest thing is that just means by the end of it, the individuals who are making content at a skill level can now up their level even further, and then make things just so much more amazing, so much more beautiful.
Cool. Yeah. Well, we got a few questions in here. Let's take a couple of these on. So, somebody was asking, what do you ask potential clients? What would let you say yes or no, I guess, to taking on a job?
You want to do that one? You want to do that one, Alex? You.
You.
Oh, your audio's gone.
I'm in an airport, and there's a lot of background noise, so I'm gonna let
There
you
is a
take
lot
it.
of background right now. That sounds good. Yeah, Alex is very last minute was called in. So if anybody's going to be in the LA area in the next couple of days, she's going to be there for AI on the lot, and then for another showcase. She'll actually be talking with Dell and NVIDIA, talking about infrastructure, AI infrastructure. So if anybody has any questions about AI infrastructure, we do run our own data centers. We actually have two, well, not data centers, we run our own racks colo location. So we have 4 racks of servers, 2 of them here in upstate New York, and then 2 of them in Austin, Texas. So we do all our training and all our processing, because there's no replacement for displacement. That's what they would say. So if we're going to talk about people and who we find interesting, one of the biggest things for us is we always do discovery, and we find discovery is not just a single direction. many of the clients that come to us are very interested in working with us, and some of them have a mindset that works extremely well to understanding there is no box. I mean, I hate to be all matrixy, there is no spoon and like, the kind of situation, but like in the end, the limitations of anything is just time, and understanding where those stop points are based on angling of want in the iron triangle, and being able to go, well, your A based on time is going to get you this, your B based on time is going to get you this, and situations like that. For us, it really was sit down and let's spend 2 days, 3 days trying to figure out exactly what your interest is, and then in the end, if you are actually interested in and how weird this can get. We did a project with KPMG a couple of years ago where we took in all of their website data and we made a live shared experience where a marketing person could go, oh, this thing is super cool. Actually, I want to up the amount of Twitter by 5%. What would that do if I dumped in 5% more money, and then watch as the AI model updated all of the different levels? And so you could see, well, actually it meant your traffic would go up and different things like that. And that was just completely like, out of the wall for a company like KPMG, where, their level of, engagement and things like that tends to be much more narrow band when it comes to weirdness. But they had that mindset, and they're like, yeah, just go, just have fun, and like figure it out and just make something that's weird. And so for us, it really is a client fit that's on that. Yeah.
So some fit, some don't.
Exactly.
Another interesting question: how many terabytes do you have?
I suspect they're talking about training data. Or if you're talking about our total terabyte size, we have in Buffalo, we are at about 3/4 of a petabyte for storage. Our training data is somewhere in the neighborhood altogether. 120, 130 terabytes currently, and that number goes up every single day. We're always either generating new training data or we're absorbing new training data. And tell you the truth, that's kind of in the world of data, kind of a drop in the bucket, but what we look for is very specialized training data. We're not doing like large language model or image, analysis or anything like that. We do some of that. But when you're talking about getting enough 3D content, this is an asset that has a good UV map. Like, you need thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of those assets. It's a lot harder to find quality assets to train your systems on than going, oh, here's an image, we'll just throw it in and say cat. This takes a little more time. So yeah.
Right. Well, what's the simplest way that you can explain AI and how it relates to the work that you do?
Okay. So the easiest way to think of AI is a huge room, infinite room full of people that are taking a test. Because you have these solutions, these answers at the end of it going, this is what I want. And then based on the training, you end up finding the smartest one out of this giant infinite room, and you go, that's the smartest because it answered most of my questions right. And then you end up making your questions harder and harder and harder and harder until in the end you end up getting the smartest thing based on what you're looking for. And how that fits in our world is there's a number of different ones. You can look at things like GANs. So we do a lot of work in GANs specifically to make secondary maps. So if you need, like, you have an albedo and you need a specularity map, or you need like an ambient occlusion or things like that. The traditional way of doing ambient occlusion was you'd make this cage around your object, and then it would start shooting these rays, and you would see where things are butting up against each other, and then you get that out of it. But an AI model can actually generate some really good answers. So GANs are really cool. You can think of them like a person who's making fake pictures, and then a detective. So the guy who's making fake pictures continues, drawing, and the detective continues figuring them out. They go back and forth, and so the person who's making the fake pictures and the forgeries will get a little bit better every time, and the detective gets a little bit better every time, until you become this level of diminishing returns where neither of them can really tell which one is the correct one or not, and in the end you end up getting something that is human acceptable for a difference between the two of them. The way that we do it is, you add in two different images, and then in the end it goes, cool, here is an output that would look like the second one. So the first one would be, we were talking about an albedo, and then the output would be an ambient occlusion. And then I look at the system and it creates its own. It was like, hey, is this good enough? And you're like, yeah, it looks good. Cool. And then you end up, passing that off, and you have a ton of them. Other ones that we do, stuff like XGBoost, we utilize that to be able to understand, differences in different computers and different systems. So, we have a large spreadsheet of information based on the analysis of what your computer is capable of. And so we end up knowing by the end of it, your computer is capable of X and the other computer is capable of Y. And then if I add in a third data set, and that third data set would be whatever your project is, it can understand, well, if X and Y, this is 20% more powerful in, say, CPU or maybe drive speed. We use about 38 different parameters. So it kind of has this understanding of different check marks as it goes along. And then if I look at the other one and goes, oh, actually, it looks like CPU's at 38. So actually, that means it's going to be above by this many milliseconds. And so based on that, it's going to be CPU that's mounted, or drive speed that's going to be over. So it ends up having this understanding that's on top of that. So, I mean, all in all, when it comes to data, AI, and analysis, we do a lot of that. The other one that's really interesting is we have these massive automated systems that can be built by people. So somebody can go in and go, I want to go ahead and do, this crazy flow. So I'm going to go ahead and do photogrammetry optimization, and then I want to go ahead and texture reprojection. And so we have computer vision models that go through and understand what a good texture reprojection looks like. And then it goes, oh no, let me try it again. Oh no, let me try it again. If it's bad, but if it's good, it continues on. At this point in time, we're working in that answer of being able to hand that back to people. Right now, it just like falls over and it's like, I broke, it don't look good, I don't know how to help. And then so like being able to go instead bifurcate the processing is where we're working on, where there's a little bit of intelligence behind being able to understand this went bad. It went bad in this specific instance. And so that means I should go, instead of this typical pipeline, I should go this semi-typical or atypical pipeline, which for this asset means it's a good one for it. And so there's a lot of places that you can use AI in. Our workflow of the week right now that we're launching is text to 2.5D plates. And so we have AI in the very beginning, which is text to image. We have image to depth. We have a segmenter, which is phenomenal. I love doing segmentation. It's really interesting. So that means being able to split up an image and understanding, my eyeball is something different than my face, which is different than my background, and things like that. We also have in painting, because when you start to make planes, you have to be able to move things around, and then one reveals the other. There's missing things because we cut it out because we were making those multiple planes. And so then it does the in painting behind it. We also have an alphabet that we curated, which automatically understands the outside of an object versus the inside of an object. There's a bunch of answers that you can do it normally. We found that the best answer for us happened to be AI algorithm that was in there. And then that's kind of the guts. I mean,
Briefly,
it's a little bit all over the place. Yeah.
Can I jump in for 2 seconds? All I was just going to say is, all of this really is built specifically, again, with artist control in mind. So we consider the AI that we're creating, the AI that we are building into our tools, to be artist enablement. We don't want to actually replace an artist. We want to open up the opportunity for them to get their creative vision executed more efficiently, because things like meshes and textures and UV maps and all kinds of other things like that, they're just the little grindy bits. They're sometimes a necessary evil. Every now and then you'll come across someone like Tim who's very passionate about these little pieces and parts. But ultimately, a lot of artists are just sort of saddled with this almost busy work that's not creative at all. It just has to happen for the thing to actually functionally be put in place and play back properly. And so it really is about how you can, continue to build tools that are effective in that role. So that's, I think, one of the most important pieces.
Yeah, actually, this was something I had worked on a project not too long ago with a gentleman named Zach Howard, who's a comic book artist, did a lot of stuff for Marvel and DC. He was a cover artist. He ended up doing a comic book called Wild Blue Yonder. They had a massive team of artists who absolutely hated what they were doing, turned the comic book into these planes, and they went ahead and angled based on view direction. So because it used the RealSense camera, as you moved your head around, then it would end up moving where the camera was that was on that, and then you end up getting these 2.5D puppet animation ones that were based on that. And that was something that I continue to think about as I build this. That this is something that could have taken that away, and they would have been so much happier because they could have focused on the animation, because they still had the same amount of time. Where did they focus their money and their time? They had to focus their money on their time as well on doing the plates and doing the backgrounds instead of as much on the animations, because the animations could have been beautiful. They would have been totally amazing for it. So if anybody wanted to look, that was a really fun project I did a number of years ago. But yeah.
So I know we don't have super long left for questions, but there was another good one that popped up in here. I'm sorry if we didn't get to everybody's question here today, but I think we do have time for one more. And somebody's asking, how do you see the field of previs changing, and what will be the skill sets of the future previs artist?
So I think something to be really clear is that previs is changing to where it is not previs person, it's going to be previs everyone. There will be a person who takes that idea and saliates it, and their entire job is to make sure that the previs is polished and it is amazing and that it's all put together. But I do see a lot of tools that are coming up that allow people like directors to just sit in there and like physical out things and be like, oh, this is amazing, this is how we do this shot, this is how we're going to see things. And this is something that has been around for a long time, where they would do it by hand. You get like a crap camera, and if anybody remembers Cameron's, actually James Cameron's really big about this. He pre-does a lot of these shots as he's building in, being able to go ahead and it was The Abyss. That was the one I was really thinking about. He made scale models with like tin cans and things like that. That is something that then gets polished by an individual. But I see a lot of tools that are going to be coming out that allow people who maybe have really good speaking capabilities, but their artistic capabilities aren't as strong. So them being able to say, this is what I'm thinking, in a kind of a voice to text kind of solution, and that text solution goes, hey, this is kind of what I'm thinking about, guys, can you put this together for me so that it actually pushes my vision further forward? So I see everybody being able to collaborate in this previs solution, and then once again having somebody who brings it down, whose skill set is being able to make it. Because if anybody's ever trying to make their own website, good for you. You need a professional, get somebody in there. That's how you turn something from, yeah, it's good, to a polished solution, is by bringing in somebody whose skill set is that.
That sounds very, very painfully familiar for myself.
Right?
I used to be a professional web developer, but I should stop making my own website. Actually, I kind of have. I still get dragged back into it though. So what I'm hearing is that we're all essentially figuring out better ways of explaining things to each other, because the previs is all about communication, really, and explaining an idea in more detail and visually, and then us being able to also explain things to computers, because that's the AI or neural nets or whatever subgenre of that we want to talk about. That's all what we're trying to do, is trying to explain things to machines and have them do what we want them to do in more better clarity. Well, as we're getting towards the end of the podcast, I just want to ask if there's anything that you guys want to share with the community, particularly if if there's things that people can follow, like the workflow of the week type thing. Any links that you have, we can drop in. But also, if anybody say wants to work with you or in any capacity, how would they go about that?
Yeah, you can reach us either our website, which is montechlabs.com. As far as the workflow of the weeks, that is workflows.montechlabs.com, so a little bit easier to find. You can also find it on the website as well. There's a link directly to it. As far as how the workflow is the week, we are actually interested in finding other people who want to collaborate. If you have a really interesting idea, you're like, hey, this is the thing that's killing me. Like in the specific one, we're working with Mountain House Media, who's in Rochester, and they're like, plates take a long time for us, and so being able to build a tool and a tool set, and like, how do we do that, and how do we put it together, and how do we make it look interesting, and we continue doing updates. You can follow me on Facebook, of course, Tim or Timothy Porter, depending on where you look, or in LinkedIn. We update all of that daily. You'll see me tag a bunch of fun people based on whatever project that we're working on. You can also email me at tim@montechlabs.com, and then there's alex@montechlabs.com. And we're happy to hear from all of you if you have anything that's interesting or fun, or you just want to share.
All of you, go connect with them. I would thoroughly recommend it. These two are good folks, and they know what they're talking about, and they're fun to work with. So I give it an endorsement for sure. Anything else that you want to share with? Oh, somebody asked. I guess I didn't get to that person's all of the questions, but someone's saying you're a Texas State guy. Have you been to? Why was it San Marcos?
San Marcos. Alex graduated from Texas State in San Marcos. So I went to Full Sail in Florida. And as far as the rest of it, I've lived in a bunch of places. I've lived in Texas, Louisiana, South Carolina, Florida, California, New York, in Canada, and a couple of places in BC side. So yeah. Did I say South Carolina? I may have missed that one.
Yeah.
I lived there too.
You did. Most of the US and
most of
Canada.
the US. Most of the US and Canada, yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Anything else that you'd like to share with the community? Any projects coming up? Any?
Yeah, our next, we're actually going to be doing some stuff with CG Pro coming up. Do you want to talk about that? I'm happy to talk about that if you're happy to talk about it.
Tell me more.
Okay, so the CG Pro project that we're talking about, if anybody hasn't seen, they have a UEFN class that is out, coming, starting, already going. And so if anybody's done a whole bunch of fun stuff with Unreal for Fortnite, we are going to be building an AI tool that helps optimize your scene. So the big problem is UEFN levels can only be 400 megabytes. That's a huge issue. But how do you know what is going to be 400 megabytes? If you didn't know, not all of the assets count. And on top of that, they only count the compressed upload. They don't count the uncompressed upload. So how do you understand that your scene, as you look at it, here it is inside of Unreal, is going to, what asset's going to count, which asset's not going to count, and how do I go ahead and compress that without having to make a build? Well, you're going to see, we're going to do updates as it goes along, and we're going to offer to help optimize all of your scenes as it goes. So that way, if you get to the end and you go, hey, that tree is just a little too big, we'll make sure that it is small enough that it can fit within your package for the build package. Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really taking optimization to the next level in having to fit into that kind of requirement. It's new to even people who were where optimization wasn't new to them. So it's very, very valuable thing that you guys are doing there, and I appreciate being able to collaborate with you guys on it. We're super excited about the Fortnite space and the expansion that Epic have led into the what the artist formerly known as the metaverse, but being able to collect in 3D spaces, persistent 3D spaces online. That's a mouthful though. I guess it needs a new name, but yeah, that's really cool. I think what you guys are doing there, and appreciate being able to collaborate with you on it.
Same here. It's going to be a lot of fun. Definitely very excited to work with your team, your group, and all the wonderful people that are learning from you guys, being able to convert, upgrade, upskill, and definitely make really amazing and beautiful things.
Well, that's a perfect sentence to end on, I think. And just want to say a huge thanks to you both for being here and squeezing the time in, even with your busy schedules and travel. And hopefully, we'll get to see you when you're in LA, Alex. But I appreciate
hope
you
so.
being here. Yeah. Yep. Safe flight. And thank you both for being a part of this today. Really appreciate it.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
All right.
Yeah, you bet. Cool. Well, again, thank you very much to our audience for being here today as well, asking great questions. Look forward to another episode in 2 weeks where you can come in live and ask questions to our next guest. We have an open day coming up for CG Pro in June, beginning of June. We'll say check the website. I should know, but check the website for our open days because we have them every month. You can come in, get a free lesson, meet the crew, and we'll hopefully be visiting AI on the lot. Although we have a launch for a project which we worked on, a dolphin project for Mental Health Awareness Month, which is coming in hot. So check that out. But yeah, thanks again for everybody for being here, and we look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks. Take care, everyone.